Are you looking to install your stove range hood, but you're not sure how to do it? Then come along with us and we'll show you all the ins and outs. Let's go. Hey guys, Musa here from Quantum Home Improvements and Solutions. Welcome back. And if this is your first time to our channel, it's great having you join us. And so today I'm with my friend Brian.
Hey guys.
So Brian contacted me roughly about 2-3 months ago, and he told me that his range hood had failed and he'd had it for about 5 years. Is that right, Brian?
That's right.
Yeah, so what actually happened to it? It just turned off?
Yeah, that's right. It just turned off while we were cooking.
Yeah, okay. That's annoying. It shouldn't fail in only 5 years. So Brian's wife went and researched and found a Bosch range hood. Now, most of my tools are actually Bosch, and I love the Bosch product. They're very reliable and very good quality. I don't know much about the range hood, but I'm expecting this to be a fairly good quality. So Brian's also from the building trade, but he's a consultant. And so I asked Brian just to research the Australian standards on how to install the range hood, because it's not straightforward. So Brian, what did you find out?
I found out that we had to use a rigid pipe, and also the flute had to be a certain width and length as well.
Great. All right, so I've also done the research. Now, the reason they want you to use a certain length, because the range hood will have a certain capacity of airflow, and if you use the wrong flute size, it won't flow up hard enough. It needs to expel. Now, what they also say is vertically is the best way because heat rises. Now remember, if you are cooking with fatty foods, with oils and frying, that the walls will fill up with the residue, and eventually that would become a fire hazard, and you don't want that. And so you need something that's a flat surface. So there are a lot of products on the market like aluminium that are flexi pipe. They don't recommend to use that. So if you are going to go into a 90-degree wall, because there is no way of going up, you can do that, but you have to use a hard elbow. So it's not only recommended to use a rigid pipe, but also steel or metal. The reason being, if you're using a plastic, it is flammable, and so you don't want that. So I did a bit of research and found it's actually really hard to find rigid pipes in steel or in any kind of metal. So I went back to the company I used to work for, Steel Roofing Supply Centre, and they roll form a 150 down pipe, and so that's what we're going to be using here today. Okay, so Brian, you ready to go?
Let's do it.
Okay, I'll first just get this bracket out using my Bosch drill. So now I'm just going to mark this out at 220, just slightly over actually. There we go. Okay, so I'm just going to do this freehand. So now, I don't actually have a jigsaw with me, but not a big deal. There's always a way around things. So what I'm going to do is pre-drill. I'm going to do a series of drill holes all the way around. It will take me a few minutes, but then I'm going to use a handsaw to cut through it. So this is MDF, so it's reformed timber. Not very good in wet areas. It's okay in the kitchens, but you've got to make sure it doesn't get too moist because it does expand. All right, so now we just need to take the gyprock off, or the plasterboard. All right, and so as expected, we do have a steel beam here, and we're going to have to cut this out as well. Hence why I think they didn't put a flute here in the first place. And legally, they should have. Okay, so now one thing to note, this is the load-bearing wall. I've already checked it out. This here is just a bulkhead. So I know for a fact that it's not load-bearing. So this section's not load-bearing. So I'm just gonna cut this metal out. Be careful when you're cutting into your roof. Don't ever cut too deep. Now this was already cut out so I can actually see what was here. So I felt fairly comfortable with it. Okay, so we tried to cut these steel channels with the hacksaw, but I couldn't get the right angle and I couldn't get in there properly. So we've decided we're gonna use a grinder. Now that's pretty dangerous because the roof could be flammable, and I really want you to take precautions on this. So two ways to do it is either open up the roof. Now this is Colorbond, which means we'd have to strip the roofs right back. Now we are in winter time and there's a bit of a dew on the roof, so I don't want to go up there because it's pretty slippery. So the other way I'm going to do it is I'm going to spray. This is an old soap container. We've washed it out thoroughly. There is no residue of soap in there. And I'm just going to spray water everywhere inside and just wet everything down. Okay, so another precaution, we've got the hose sitting in the sink, ready to go. It's actually turned on. You can hear it dripping away. So now you notice that I've got power here. Not good to put power next to water or next to a grinder. So just as a precaution, we've turned it off. Brian's turned it off for me. And you can see here my charger does not show any power. So that's off. And so now I'm just gonna grind that metal part out. I'm gonna have to grind it out in pieces, unfortunately, because it's not very accessible. Look at that, I'm gonna take this off piece by piece. All right, so that section's out of the way. Now we only have to concentrate on just getting this one out of the way. There we go, look at that. Did it. All right, it's out. Okay, so we still have one issue. This beam's in the way. But like everything else, I just gotta work through it and make sure it's not an issue. So one thing I haven't mentioned, when you are working on ladders, be very careful. Most accidents happen on short ladders. Okay, so now with my Stanley knife, I've got to go in and cut the insulation so I can actually drill up. So for a marker for outside, so I know where I'm gonna cut the pipe through for outside. Okay, so now I can see the sarking, the foil and blanket. Now I'm just gonna drill a pilot hole. I'm gonna have to get this pretty close and it's really hard to see in here. In actual fact, Brian, you may have to be doing this. My arm is nowhere near long enough. I'll get you to turn your hand, not that way, yeah. Because once you get through, that's the way it's gonna have to be.
Jeez, how did you reach it? Well,
it's gonna slip.
Yeah.
Hold it best you can.
I can't tell. I think it's slipping.
Doesn't matter, just keep going. Just try to find a spot that'll just drill. I'm gonna have to cut a small hole.
I don't know if that was too easy or...
Did it go through?
I think so.
Okay, so that was a challenge. All right, now we're ready to put the range hood on, and this comes with a template, which is gonna make life so much easier. So I've pushed the holes through that I need, just there, and one in the middle here on the bottom. So what you've got to do is basically put it at the height you need. Now we're going to put it at the screw height that was already existing, so roughly about there. So fair trading say that you have to have your range hood off the bench by 650 mil, but we're going 700, only because the holes were already here, as I said. All right, so now what I'm going to do is place this on that mark I just did. All right. So basically there, and I'm going to marry this arrow to the center of the mark up here. So then I know that I'm on line. All right, Brian, if you can hold that for me. And just one up high, beautiful. Now I'm gonna put a level on here just to be safe, just to be sure. I'll just put a mark here first, then I'm gonna put a mark on these holes. Now this is a spade drill made specifically for cutting into tiles or drilling into tiles. So it's not a masonry drill bit, and it's made for ceramic or terracotta tiles. Now just drill these two. Okay, so these are the brackets. They're round. and the top section's where the range hood sits on, just there. And it's great. So you put your screw through, and then if it's out of level, you need to make this fairly level, you just turn it and it raises it or lowers it. So these screws actually have a star bit required for them to put them in, and they're quite long. I don't need to go that long. It's only just a small screw that's required. The tile is only about this thick with the plasterboard. So I'm going to change the screw over to just a Phillips head. Beautiful. Okay, so they're in, and you can see how they tilt. So now I'm just going to mark out for the brackets that hold the vent cover. Okay, before we put the range hood on, we're going to put this vent cover on. So this is a one-way vent cover, so it actually has the flaps open up. So when the air is blowing upwards, these will open, but when there's a downward draft, these will close off to stop any wind from coming in, and also to reduce some of the sound. Okay, so now I'll just put this in place, but just one thing, you've got to be careful. There is a screw hole here. So what happens is that you put it just in, the screw just sits there. So you put this in place, and just carefully put that screw in. Beautiful. Okay, let's do that tight. Okay, beautiful. All right, so that's ready to go. One thing I've got to say, I did actually miss the template, and I marked the holes up top. It was wrong. The holes up top were actually for that top bracket, so I had to mark back down to put it in the right position. All right, so we're ready to go now. All we're going to do is just drop this in, sit over the red brackets. That's it. And there's a little screw under here, and there it is. That's in place. That is beautiful. All right, so now all they've got to do is just put this little round nut on top. Thanks, Brian. It is a little tricky. There we go. All right, and just tighten that up. Okay, so now I'll just put the filter back on. Okay, there we go. Okay, Brian, can I just grab the ladder? Okay. Great, this is looking fantastic. Just, it looks nice.
Yeah.
All right, so now I'll just plug this in, just to see if everything's working before we start on outside. All right. Okay, Brian, turn it on. Beautiful. This is the downpipe that we got. This is going to be the flute we're going to use. This is lock seamed. I don't know if you can see that, but there's a lock seam there. So it's roll formed. And it is also tapered. So when I bought this from Steel Roofing Supply Centre, it came with a tapered section. I did cut that off because it's in the way. And also, we tried the flute on the actual range hood, and we found its exact size, and we needed to be bigger. So what I've done there is actually cut into the downpipe, into the flute, roughly about 30 mil, and just slithered. And the cuts are around about, not exactly, but around about, probably about 25 mil apart. So I've done a series of cuts, and just with my pliers, I've just opened that up. I'll just bring it across so you can see. Okay, so now what we're going to have to do, the air flowing from the range hood will blow strong enough to pass that, but there might be a bit of turbulence just in this area here where it's coming out of the range hood. So I'm just going to put a touch of silicone around that later, once we find it works. Now I'm not going to be putting silicone on the inside. I'm not going to lock this into the range hood, because one day, probably in around 20, 30 years, this will need to be replaced. And the last thing you want to do is to make it hard for someone to get it out. So now, you can see there, the rain can come in on the top. Now what we've got here, we had to get what they call a cowl. Now it used to be known as a Chinaman hat, but we're living in a politically correct world, so we need to call it a cowl. So anyway, I'm going to be putting this hat on top, and that'll waterproof it, and that'll lock that in with a screw. But we also need to cut this Dektite down. Now this Dektite is from 75 mil to 175 mil. Now remembering this pipe is around about 150 mil. Now I'm not sure, we weren't able to see how aligned we were. Now there is a batten here. Now I know that this was at the high point, which is not where I want to be. So at worst case, I'm going to have to cut down this way. So what I'm going to do is just cut this area out here so I can have a view what's going on inside. I'll just do a rough mark. It's not going to be perfect at all. Just like I did inside for cutting that board, the MDF, I'm just going to do a series of holes so I can get my tin snip in there. Actually, this will probably be the best position right here. All right, let me see if I can drill that out. right, so we've missed off a fair amount, but luckily this Dektite's quite big, so that's really, really good. So we're gonna actually sit this roughly about there, and the hole is actually here. So I'm just gonna mark roughly the center, which is just here. Okay, so we have a bit of an issue here. The pipe is sitting in position. It's sitting nicely inside, not all the way down yet, but we only need to go just a little bit more across this way and a little bit higher, so closer to the batten. Now, so that means that we won't be able to use this Dektite because it's going to be too, the hole will be too wide. So we've gone to the shop and bought another one, a bigger one. So it's bigger by about 80 mil. Okay, I'm going to try this hopefully for the last time. Beautiful, fantastic. Okay, so now it's time to put the Dektite on. So we need to just cut the rings to the size that we need. Okay, so just cut that around. Okay, so now we just push this down. And that fits beautifully. Okay, so now just using a bit of that ColourBond corrugated, I'm actually gonna make a little bracket here. Just fold it up. And I'm just going to place that bracket just here to hold the pipe in place. Okay, so that's it. Okay. One thing you got to be careful of when you are drilling on the roof, taking out screws or putting in screws, you'll get shavings. And if you don't take those shavings off, they will rust. So you've got to blow them out or just take them off, sweep them off. Okay, so now I just put the Chinaman hat on. I've done a pre-drill, so I'll just screw them in. Okay, so now I'm going to use Selly's roof and gutter silicone. It is a neutral cured silicone. Okay, so I just put a series of screws through, just making sure that I take it down to the corrugation. So I squeeze down the valley with my finger and just put a screw on the ridge. So one thing I've got to say, if you're not confident on the roof, definitely don't do this. If you need to, just get someone to do it for you, like a plumber who do this regularly. Now you can see this is a little lopsided. I have no choice on this because it did come far too to the left and we had to bring it over. As you can see, I've put way too much silicone, but we will be taking that back off. See the pipe? It's pretty sturdy. Yeah. Not going to go anywhere. Okay, just clean off all the silicone. This is looking really good. So what I do to clean the silicone, I use paint partner and just spray a bit of water and just run that down and you can see how much silicone comes off. So easy. I love paint partner. Okay, all done. Now we're ready to finish inside. Okay, we're in the home stretch, the last thing to do. And so all we've got to do now is just put this flute cover on. It's quite easy. Now there is two little slots here. This is upside down. There's two slots here. So it depends on where you put your bracket. Now going by the template, I've put it to the highest point. So what you've got to do is squeeze that little 90-degree section into this slot. So it's pretty easy. Now this is adjustable. So you can actually adjust it any size you want. And so luckily, this is the right size, only by like 3 millimeters, probably 5 millimeters. But anyway, so what I'll do first, if you can hold that, Brian. And now, so Brian did actually take the plastic that was on there. He stripped it all off. And we do have the plastic up here. We've left it purposely so we don't scratch the top. And so also the filters have the plastic. So when you see stainless steel that looks blue, it means that it's plastic and you need to take that off. But we'll do that later. All right, so we've plugged in the power point. So now I'm just going to quickly test it. So first you just put it on. So that's number 1, number 2. So you have to wait a minute. There's a bit of a lag. Number 3, it's very quiet. And it's very powerful. But then there's also the boost. And then there's the power boost. So for all you rev heads, that is incredible. You can actually feel the breeze coming upwards. That's just really good. All right, I'll just turn that off. All right, so now I'll just get up a little higher, get myself in position. Now with the wiring, I'm gonna keep this all in here, just nicely neat, packed in there. All right, so now all we do is just stand this upright, let that come down. And as you can see, it's 3mm cover. Okay, so mine's in. Yep, it's in. And so all you do is just lock it in place with a little screw. It's just a Phillips head, and you'll see the slots on the side. Okay, that's in. Beautiful. All right, I'll just put that screw in. So I'm actually lifting this up while I'm doing it to lock it up, so it stays as high as it can. All right, just lock that off, and that's locked off. Perfect. Now this will just then fall into place. There it is there, it just fell in. So there's a little bit of a slot there and it just sinks in. Okay, so Brian, we'll just take this off. Now you can see our hand marks all over this. Stainless steel gets dirty very, very easily. There is a solution they've given to clean it, and Brian will do that later. Okay, that looks fantastic. Okay, Brian, it's been a long day, but we did it.
Yeah.
Looks fantastic. Mate, I've got to be honest, I was a bit reluctant when I first looked at the ceiling. I thought, oh, there's a few obstacles there. But when we came to do it, now I realised seriously, and I said it before, now I know why they didn't do this. But there is a legal requirement. They should actually do it no matter what. But Brian, this is fantastic. It's a great system. I actually really like it. It's got Wi-Fi. Have you actually read the instructions?
No, not yet. Not for that.
Wow. I mean, you could probably just turn everything on when you're at work or something.
Yeah.
Wow, this is fantastic. I really like it. So Nicole has done a great job. And as I said, Bosch is my preferred power tools.
Thank you, Mister.
No, you're welcome. Brian, you did a great job. It was very good having you with me. So if you are interested in a Bosch system, I will put their link in the descriptions below, as well as Steel Roofing Supply Centre and all the products I use today. So that's the end of this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you got something out of it. And if you have any comments at all, please leave them below and I will get back to you. And I ask you, please consider to subscribe, hit the like button and share this video, and there's many more to come. Thanks, guys.
See ya. Musa.
Almost there.
What's the bad news?
I don't have any. The bad news, I have to take this out, right? Okay, if that makes you happy, but the good news is I think I should be able to get it hopefully before tomorrow. Because once you get through, that's the way it's going to have to be.
That's the way it's gonna be on the down.
Please don't do anything silly.
Oh, jeez, Musa. Why did you just ask me to cut off my arm?
I see you're in the mood now.
Just comes to me.
And just view it from a distance.
Okay. From a distance.
Take 172. All we've got to do is just plug this in, and I'm going to test it. Just make sure it's on. Yep. Yeah.